Welcome to Serving with Success, Meal Components and Quantities for Lunch. In this module, participants will learn the key meal components and quantities per age group to meet the National School Lunch Program, the method of food-based menu planning, the grade groups, overlaps, components, and quantities necessary for a reimbursable meal, the meal pattern requirements for each age and grade group within all reimbursable meal service lines is the foundation of the federal school nutrition programs. A reimbursable meal is one that meets the USDA meal pattern requirements and is served to an eligible student and priced as an entire meal rather than based on individual items. Such a meal qualifies for reimbursement with federal funds for districts participating in the National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program. All local education agencies must ensure that every reimbursable meal service line meets the daily and weekly meal pattern requirements for the appropriate age and grade group served. This includes meeting the meal pattern requirements if it is serving multiple age grade groups in a single location, and whether or not children are utilizing self-service stations. Schools now have a single menu planning approach, food-based menu planning. Schools must offer 5 components to all students daily, in correct portion size, to ensure lunch meals are meeting the age group requirements, in daily required portion sizes, and also meeting weekly requirements for portion sizes and dietary specifications. Meal components are to be offered according to grade and required portions. K-8 requirements offer an overlap that is very helpful in menu planning.
For the school lunch program, we require that there's 5 components that need to be served. And those are going to be your meat alternate, your grain, your milk, and you have a fruit, and you have a vegetable. But those are basically the 5 categories that make up a complete lunch.
Food-based menu planning also identifies calorie, saturated fat, trans fat, and sodium standards for each of the age and grade groups receiving school meals. This will be covered in detail in the Dietary Specifications and Nutrient Analysis module. Schools must meet the food component and quantities of daily and weekly requirements. The grade groups for food-based menu planning are kindergarten through 5th grade, 6th grade through 8th grade, 9th grade through 12th grade. Here are the lunch serving calorie ranges for the 3 grade groups. The lunch calorie levels for the 3 grade groups indicate a calorie range overlap. A single menu that falls in this range of 600 to 650 calories per week will satisfy the requirements for grade groups K through 5 and 6 through 8. The meat component in the meal is always referred to as meat alternate. The minimum daily requirement of meat alternate is 1 ounce. However, students should be offered a 2-ounce serving several days a week in order to fulfill the minimum weekly requirement of 8 ounces. Grades 6 through 8 have a minimum daily requirement of 1 ounce. However, the minimum weekly requirement is 9 ounces. In order to fulfill this requirement, students should be offered a 2-ounce serving several days per week. The weekly minimum serving of meat alternate is 10 ounces for grades 9 through 12, while a daily requirement is 2 ounces. Examples of meat alternate items are eggs, yogurt, cheese, and peanut butter. To calculate meat servings, this example shows that 60 servings of ground beef are needed. Using the guide for meat alternates, included in the Food Buying Guide for Child Nutrition Programs, we find ground beef, no more than 20% fat, includes USDA commodity located in Column 1. Column 2 shows the purchase unit is a pound, and Column 3 indicates there are 7.89 servings of cooked lean meat in a pound. Column 4 indicates a 1 1/2 ounce serving size. Divide the 60 servings needed by the 7.89 servings per pound. The result is 7.6, which is rounded up to the quarter pound. Therefore, 7.75 pounds of USDA commodity ground beef, containing no more than 20% fat, is needed to serve a total of 60 1 1/2 ounce servings. The minimum meal servings for the meat alternate component for the K through 5 group is a serving requirement of 8 ounces per week. And the 6 through 8 grade group has a serving requirement of 9 ounces of meat alternates. Therefore, a single menu that offers at least 9 ounces of meat alternate per week could be served to both the K through 5 and the 6 through 8 grade groups. Legumes can be served as a meat alternate or a vegetable. A quarter cup of drained beans equals 1 ounce equivalent of the meat alternate requirement. Other meat alternates are 1/2 cup or 4 ounces of soy or standard yogurt, creditable as 1 ounce equivalent. 2 tablespoons of peanut butter or other nut butters equals 1 ounce equivalent. 1 large egg is equal to 2 ounces equivalent. Cheese contributes ounce for ounce. Schools must offer vegetables to all students each day and must meet the daily and weekly requirements for the vegetable subgroups.
You just can't serve a certain vegetable every single day and it be in compliance. You have to break it down by subgroups. And the different subgroups that we have for the school lunch program are the dark green vegetables, such as your spinach and your kale, your red-orange, which are the tomatoes and carrots, beans, peas, and legumes, which are the black beans, garbanzo beans, things like that. And then you have your starchy vegetables, which are your potatoes, french fries, what they usually serve with those. And your other category of vegetable, which anything that doesn't fall under the categories that we already talked about, they fit into that category right there. So we just want to make sure they're eating the rainbow and getting a good variety of vegetables to eat.
Additional vegetables include raw leafy salad greens. These credit as 1/2 the volume served. For example, 1/2 cup of romaine lettuce contributes 1/4 cup toward the dark green vegetable subgroup. All other vegetable subgroups are credited by volume as served. Any vegetable subgroup may be offered to meet the additional total weekly requirement. The minimum meal servings for the lunch vegetable component for grades K through 8 indicate a serving requirement in the K through 5 and 6 through 8 grade groups at 3/4 cups per day and 3 3/4 cups per week. The requirements for high school, grades 9 through 12, indicate a serving of 1 cup per day and 5 cups of vegetables per week. Fruits are a separate lunch food component in the school nutrition program, with their own minimum daily and weekly requirements for each of the 3 grade groups. Schools may offer fruits that are fresh, frozen, canned in light syrup, water, or fruit juice. Pasteurized fruit juice or 100% full-strength fruit juice may be offered. No more than half of the weekly fruit offering may be in the form of juice. Dried fruit, whole dried fruit or whole dried fruit pieces credit as twice the volume served. For example, 1/2 cup of raisins counts as 1 cup fruit toward the fruit component requirement. Other fruit components are credited by volume as served. 1 cup equals 1 cup. The lunch meal servings for the fruit component indicate a requirement overlapping in the K through 5 and 6 through 8 grade groups at 1/2 cup per day and 2 1/2 cups per week. High school requirements indicate a serving of 1 cup per day and 5 cups of fruit per week. These are some commonly eaten fruits that can be served as the fruit component for breakfast. These are some of the items that are considered non-creditable fruits and do not contribute to the requirements for fruit components in the school breakfast program and school lunch program. Students in grades K through 12 must be allowed to choose from at least 2 varieties of milk, even in alternate meal service locations. The daily requirement for grades K through 12 is 1 cup. The weekly requirement for grades K through 12 is 5 cups. The choices of fluid milk include flavored or unflavored fat-free milk, low-fat or 1% unflavored milk, and fat-free or low-fat lactose-free milk. The LEA must ensure any milk substitutes are allowable and that required documentation is on file. If children cannot consume cow's milk due to medical or special dietary needs, other than a disability, non-dairy beverages may be served in place of cow's milk. Non-dairy beverages must be nutritionally equivalent to milk and meet the nutritional standards for fortification of calcium, protein, vitamin A, vitamin D, and other nutrients to the levels found in cow's milk. The non-dairy beverage must meet the nutrient standards listed in the chart shown. A list of creditable fluid milk substitutes can be found on the DESI FNS website. These products are non-dairy beverages. which meet USDA criteria for fluid milk substitutions. The daily and weekly requirements for grains for the 3 grade groups are as shown. Grain-based desserts are limited to no more than 2 ounces per week. All of the grains offered at lunch must be whole grain rich.
We've been trying to gradually introduce the changing of grains to be whole grain rich, and what whole grain rich means is 50% of that product has to be a whole grain, and it would be considered whole grain rich.
For the school meal programs, whole grain rich foods contain 100% whole grain, or a blend of whole grain meal and/or flour, and enriched meal and/or flour, of which at least 50% is whole grain. Whole grain rich products must contain 50% or more whole grains, and any remaining grains must be enriched. The words whole grain in the product name do not necessarily mean that the product is considered whole grain rich. In order to determine if a product is truly whole grain rich, you must look at the ingredient list. If the first ingredient listed contains the word whole, such as whole wheat flour or whole oats, the product would then be considered whole grain rich. If there are several grain ingredients, such as multigrain bread, the product may contain 30% refined flour and 70% whole grain.
So it is important to make sure that you do not just go by the front of the label where something says wheat, because that can be very misleading. When you turn it over and you actually look at the ingredients, you need to be extra cautious to make sure it is meeting the whole grain rich requirements of the school lunch program.
Another way to determine if your product is whole grain rich is to look for the yellow whole grain rich stamp. This is a special packaging symbol used to indicate that the USDA has already approved the item as whole grain rich. The list of ingredients tells the entire story. Look for these whole grains on the package label: whole wheat, whole grain, whole white corn, rolled oats, wild rice, brown rice, whole corn, whole white corn, whole white wheat, buckwheat, bulgur, and quinoa. These products are not whole grains: flour, white flour, wheat flour, enriched flour, all-purpose flour, enriched unbleached flour, self-rising wheat flour, semolina, corn grits, rice flour, and couscous. Baked goods require 16 grams of creditable grain ingredients in order to provide a 1-ounce equivalent grain serving. The following chart lists common grain products and their ounce equivalents for servings of items in groups B and C. The ingredient labels of non-mixed whole grain products, such as breads and cereals, must list whole grains as the first and primary ingredient in the product. For items prepared by the school, the food recipe is used to determine if the item is whole grain rich and meets the minimum requirements for a grain serving. Weights of grain bread products are rounded down to the nearest quarter serving size. In this example, a slice of bread weighs 26 grams, and the weight of 1 USDA serving is 28 grams. The slice of bread may count as 0.75, or 3/4 of 1 USDA serving of grains or breads. To calculate the number of servings of grains and breads, obtain the total weight of the package and the number of items it contains. Divide the total weight of the package by the number of items in the package to determine the weight of one item. Locate the grains and breads group that has the product listed. Compare the calculated weight of one item to the weight of a minimum USDA serving in that group. Divide the calculated weight of one item by the minimum serving to find the number of USDA grains and bread servings in the product. In this example, calculate the grain contribution of a from-scratch recipe for rolls. It is necessary to know the amount of grains used in the recipe. This recipe calls for 1 pound 14 ounces of whole wheat flour and 1 pound 12 ounces of enriched flour. Convert these amounts into ounces. There are 16 ounces in a pound. For the 1 pound 14 ounces of whole wheat flour, add 16 to 14 for a total of 30 ounces. For the 1 pound 12 ounces of enriched flour, add 16 to 12 for a total of 28 ounces. Add these two amounts for a total of 58 ounces of grains. Convert ounces into grams. There are 28.35 grams in an ounce. Multiply 28.35 grams times 58 ounces of grains. for a total of 1,644.3 grams of grain. Divide the total grams by the number of portions in the recipe, in this case 50, to calculate 32.886 creditable grains per portion. Divide the 32.886 grams of creditable grains by the grains per portion. This value will always be 16. To calculate 2.055 ounces equivalent per serving. Round this number down for an answer of 2 ounces equivalent per serving. After properly planning the meals to meet the regulations, it is required that each serving line must meet the daily and weekly requirements to ensure that every student in line, from the first to the last, may choose a reimbursable meal every day in any line that they may choose. Now that you have finished viewing meal components and quantities for lunch, complete the following brief quiz.